Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about a New South Wales court case called Gregory versus the State of New South Wales. It's a school bullying case, and the plaintiff succeeded, and that's on the basis, really, the defendant conceded liability initially, and the argument was about
there would have been a lot of
damages.
damning evidence in the background, Harry.
Yeah. Now, what interests me, Maria, is that it seemed to me that he's made a reasonable recovery in the sense that even after 2002 he got back to work, and he ended up working in a cafe that his parents bought 5 days a week. In court he said he was working 3 days a week. There was video evidence of him working 5 days a week. And the judge found that from time to time he was exaggerating his symptoms, which, do you see much of that, or how do you assess?
Look, sometimes people can exaggerate. That may have had something to do with all the troubles that he'd had along the way. So sometimes people lose sense of reality and what's actually going on. In his own mind, he may have felt that he was severely incapacitated in some way, and that may not actually be the reality. So people can tend to lose sight of what's actually real for them if they are suffering a psychological illness.
Really, really bad days, and obviously some not so bad days. That's really...
Well, that's possible too, absolutely.
But the other issue is how do you predict what's going to happen in the future? I think it was conceded that the bullying was fairly severe. Yes, yep. He sort of tried to get on with his life, then some events had re-triggered
came back and re-triggered, yep.
What do you say about the prognosis in the future for someone? He's 30 years old. Is he going to get on with his life and never have any problems, or have some ongoing problems?
Well, that's a bit like having a crystal ball. It's very, very difficult to know. But had he had proper treatment, the likelihood of the reoccurrence may have been diminished. So again, it highlights the fact that proper treatment is essential, and if you don't have it, the problem will keep coming back. Something will come back to re-trigger it eventually.
He's 30 years of age at the time of the hearing.
Yeah.
Does that mean that he should have treatment for the rest of his life? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, not necessarily for the rest of his life, but it doesn't sound like he's actually had adequate treatment. I think he had treatment from a school counsellor. We don't even know, whether the counsellor was fully equipped to deal with some very complex issues: OCD, major depression, agoraphobia. They're very complex.
And self-mutilation as well.
Self-mutilation.
And I think, look, it's fair to say from reading the judgment, I don't think he had a lot of treatment over the years.
No.
And interestingly enough, the parties couldn't agree on a figure to put to the judge for future treatment. So it might be treatment once a month, every 3 months, every 6 months. We don't know.
I suspect it may be a little bit more than that, at least initially.
You get someone in these circumstances who would have been subjected to the bullying at a very young age, and he's 30 when he gets a trial. What's the chance of him recovering fully?
If you delay treatment, it can take a lot longer.
Isn't it a case that if he had had adequate treatment, Harry, this is what I'm thinking, it would have probably meant that in the future at some point in time he might have needed some lesser treatment to keep him on
treatment,
deck,
just to keep him going along. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to keep him...
But look, at the end of the day, the court took everything into account, and the judge said, in effect, his future earning capacity has been diminished by 20%. So they calculated figures based on that basis. So he had an 80% capacity to work and 20%...
And how is that calculated, Harry?
Diminished. Well, it's based basically on what his activities have been since he left school, because he did work, and he's running a cafe reasonably successfully.
What the doctors would say about
and
his
what the
capacity
doctors
in the
say.
future.
On the medical evidence and what he says. So, look, it ended up as a judgment of nearly $500,000.
Well, I mean, they gave him a significant amount of money for pain and suffering, I would have thought.
Pain and suffering, the figure was $247,500 as a pain and suffering, past and future. So that's the court. That's what the court assessed. So, look, the next case we've got is a woman in New South Wales. Again, the case succeeded.
Yes.
I think it was subject to an appeal, and the appeal was dismissed. But this was a case where it was directly workplace bullying. The bullying took place over a period of 6 months. She was a woman who was working for the Public Service, Department of Housing, and she was appointed as a team leader.
Yep.
And I think the underlying problem was, surprise, surprise, she wanted the people under her to work. And the people under her didn't want to work. So there was a bit of a conflict. And the support she got from her superior was totally inadequate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And over a 6-month period, I think she was humiliated, abused, and
They ignored her. She
ignored all
That's
the complaints.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
But
is a
also
case where
they-
she did actually put something in writing, but that didn't.
Wasn't and that
wasn't
often
acted on.
happens.
She was ostracised too by the people that that were supposed to be taking her,
Yeah.
her instructions.
That's
She
right.
was there.
Yeah, she was a superior, and
Yeah.
look, reading between the lines, I think she was trying to get them to work, and
they-
She was
they're in
really
public-
ignored.
That's
yeah,
right.
she was ignored.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but her superior, the negligence was interesting because it was things the superior didn't do, which was negligent.
Yes.
He didn't take any proactive steps. So I think that
The
was
most proactive step they took, Harry, was they shook on it and said all things.
Yeah,
everything's
that's
sweet.
right.
They had one meeting where they tried to hug and make up.
Well, they shook hands.
They
That
shook
was it.
hands, but that wasn't enough.
But sometimes, if managers don't want to deal with the issue, or can't, or whatever the case is, then maybe removing yourself from that situation, is the best option, because
Well, Harry-
ultimately she suffered enormously.
The case before this, that was abuse over a long period of time.
That's right.
That was at least 6 years.
Yeah.
This one lasted how long?
6 months.
6 months.
6 months,
So
yeah. Significant though.
you take your victims, you find them, I suppose, and
But and I mean, there was a triggering event, which was a meeting held behind the back of all her support staff, and then when confronted with that, she tipped the balance. Then she put in a work cover claim
She
that was
did.
accepted,
Yeah.
and then she sued for negligence.
Can I say this? One of her biggest complaints was that she was spoken to rudely and abruptly by quite a few people. Now, the Occupational Health and Safety guidelines published by WorkSafe deals with all these issues.
Yeah,
So
they give
there is-
examples of
Yeah.
Workplace bullying and what it means.
What it constitutes,
Yeah,
yep, yep.
inappropriate
Pretty detailed
language.
It's a great document, and if anyone has any questions, that's a really good reference point for them. Yeah.
Well, Maria, that's all we've got time for today or tonight with the situation on psychological injuries. It's a very significant topic,
it is.
and I think, as Tony says, it's increasing increasing claims in this area. It's something that we've got to deal with. Thanks very much for
Thank
coming
you.
on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank
very,
you.
very interesting. We'll be back after the break.